Welcome to Tosh Talks. I'm talking, so you can presume that I am Tosh. And I am the book buyer for Book Soup in West Hollywood. We're an independent bookstore that's been there for many, many years. We feature a lot of interesting books. Interesting could be defined as odd or weird, but I define it as sort of essential in one word. Essential is the key word. I want to focus on a series of books. Some are older releases and one pretty new release. The World of Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons was a rocket scientist who invented a certain sort of rocket fuel or a certain key integrant or something that's important for fuel to actually make rockets go up, to make jets go up, rockets go out of space. Jack Parsons is very much part of the origin of that story. And what's interesting about Jack Parsons is that this all takes place in the 40s, right after World War II. Jack was located in Pasadena. And it was in Pasadena where he and fellow scientists discovered this particular type of fuel for make rockets to go out, to project. And so by day it became a very successful rocket scientist. And nighttime, I'm using this in a sort of poetic sense, his other life, he was into the occult magic. He was very much a follower of Aleister Crowley. So you have this strange duality of on one hand, he was a rocket scientist. On the other hand, he was very much involved in the whole Aleister Crowley OTO movement of the late 40s. And Crowley at this time was still alive. And Aleister Crowley, who was British, acknowledged Jack Parsons sort of being the captain or lieutenant of the American wing of Crowley's interests of the OTO. I'm not sure I'm getting all these facts straight because I'm not an expert on this. But two books that focusing on Jack Parsons came out over the years. One is Sex and Rockets, The Occult World of Jack Parsons. This is the first book that came out on Parsons, and very well researched, very interesting read about Jack Parsons and his world. The other book that came out is on Jack Parsons, like a year later, is Strange Angel, The Otherworldly Life of Rocket Scientist John Whiteside Parsons, or Jack Parsons. And actually, between the two books, you might think, which one's the better one? And to be honest, I think you need to read both of them, because they both have a slightly different take on the same subject matter. But Parsons is absolutely, totally fascinating because one, he was very much a part of the time when there's a new generation of science fiction writers were coming onto the scene, writing for various like pulp science fiction magazines. And Jack Parsons was a huge fan of science fiction writing, and he knew these writers. One of these writers was L. Ron Hubbard, who eventually became the creator, the founding member of Scientology. And at the time of the late 40s, Hubbard was basically a science fiction writer who wrote his fiction for various pulp magazines at the time. And in theory, Hubbard was very much involved with Jack Parsons' interest in Aleister Crowley's black magic, or white magic. Magic spelled with a K. And this is disputed by people in Scientology, and I don't know what's true or not, you have to read the books. But the fact is, Hubbard did know Jack Parsons, was a close friend of Jack Parsons. In fact, Hubbard ran off with Jack Parsons' first wife. And Jack Parsons caused a damper in Jack Parsons' life. But Parsons is a fascinating guy because, one, he was sort of like Earl Flynn. He looked like Earl Flynn, incredibly handsome guy. And it's a remarkable story of one end, like a science story, like these young guys making rockets and exploding things in their backyard and becoming very successful in actually inventing a rocket fuel. It's almost like a Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew type of narrative, where it's like a fantasy adventure for a young boy, and Parsons sort of did that. But on the other hand, he was totally involved with the black magic thing, or the white magic. And that's an interesting aspect of him, how he looks at science. Does he look at science as sort of a form of white magic, or vice versa, or is science actually a version of magic of sorts, or vice versa? But it's really interesting that this group of people got together who are quite eccentric, including the science fiction writers, including Hubbard, who made this remarkable world in the late 40s in Pasadena, California, of all places. And Parsons had various orgies of sorts for the magic thing. It was a very sexy time, a very sexy man. And what happened, sadly, was in the late 40s, Parsons was cleaning up his laboratory, his home laboratory, and he dropped some liquid which caused explosion. And he was killed in the explosion. And but even that, the story ends in such a surreal light, because some people think he was either killed by the government, killed by the Scientologists, killed by Hubbard. I don't think any of this is true. I think it was just an accident. I think he just dropped the liquid, and which caused this huge explosion. The whole house was destroyed. And a recent book that came out, Wormwood Star, The Magical Life of Marjorie Cameron. And I have to be honest here. I knew Cameron. She was a very, very close friend of my father's, Wallace Berman, and my mom, Shirley Berman. And my mom actually met Jack Parsons as a teenager in the late 40s. So my family has a certain ties to these people. And Spencer Kansa did a really, really good biography on Cameron. Now, what's connected? Cameron was Jack Parsons' second wife. And Cameron was very much part of the cult, or the groupings of Aleister Crowley and the OTO. She was a witch, officially. She was very much into magic. She was a poet. She was a painter, an incredible painter. And hopefully within the next couple of years, you'll see more of her paintings being exhibited around the world. And I suspect there'll be many, many more books on Cameron and her artwork, as well as on Jack Parsons' world. It's a fascinating story that never ends. But Spencer Kansa worked on this book for about 2 or 3 years. It came out of England. I think we're the only store in America, Book Soup, that carries this book right now, because I got this from England. But Wormwood Star is a fascinating tale of Cameron and her life. She started off being, she was born in the Midwest somewhere, and she was just a typical, or beyond typical, bohemian person. There's a hardcore bohemian personality. And she worked and met Kenneth Anger, and was a star in Kenneth Anger's inauguration of The Pleasure Dream. And also worked with Curtis Harrington and Dennis Hopper in a film called Night Tide. A great film, you should see it. It's on DVD, as well as the Kenneth Anger film. And she's just a fascinating woman. As I knew her, she was fascinating, and when you read this book, she's absolutely fascinating. And there's already people really obsessed about this book and about her life, as well as with Jack Parsons, because these people are surely like the first, I won't say the first, but probably the most interesting bohemian types that somehow got into the nature of science, the nature of literature and the arts, as well as into the magic, cult, the whole sex thing. And it's a remarkable story, and I would get all 3 of these books if I were you, because the story is, again, really incredible. And so again, we got John Carter, who wrote Sex and Rockets, the first book on Jack Parsons. About a year later, Strange Angel came out by George Pendle, who I think normally writes for the New Yorker or New York Magazine, and he usually writes on science subjects, but he did a really great objective biography on this man. And of course, Spencer Kansa's Wormwood Star, which is a great, great book, and I really, really strongly recommend it. And if you want to get a copy of these books, you can always contact Book Soup, and we'll be happy to get them for you. And that is an episode of Tosh Talks, and I hope to see you soon, perhaps next week. Save your time for me. Thank you. Bye-bye.